were you saying?
Hold on 1 second.
It says we started streaming live on Facebook, so maybe I should
Yes.
let people know that we're just getting underway with the.
Yes. Well, I was just going to do that. Thank you, Michael. This is PK McCary in Houston, Texas, with KPFT Community Advisory Board, with other members of Pacifica sister stations around the country. And we welcome you to Pacifica Fight Back's virtual national town hall meeting, the third one. Please excuse us as we get started. We will try to get things underway, but in the meantime, for those who want to come into Pacifica Fight Back so that you can ask questions or make comments that can be heard. You can go to pacificafightback.org, get the link and join us on Zoom, or you can listen to us here on Facebook Live, where you can also leave your comments and messages, and we'll do our best to respond to those as we can. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome, everyone.
PK, can I ask a question real quick?
You sure can.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to tell Michael I miss his morning oatmeal. And then the other thing is, George Funmaker, are you on the are you in the Zoom?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, relative. Thank you for coming.
I'm trying to send you my bio real quick.
All right.
If you want to, Brother George, you can put it on in the chat.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Hello.
Ah, Mimi.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hi. Hi, PK.
Paulina, hi.
Hey,
Hi, Mimi.
Got your curly hair going on, huh?
Got my me or Mimi, both of us. I just haven't brushed my hair in a bit. My class got canceled, so that's why I'm here on time. I was supposed to be late.
No, when you're here, you're on time. That's the way we'll do
There we go.
That's a really
Sounds right.
constructive attitude. That is
Yes.
a non-judgmental person speaking.
I like that.
I'll tell that to the judge the next time I default when I'm supposed to be. Hey, I'm here.
That's PK,
Mhm.
man. She is a mensch. She is just a wonderful human being.
Well,
Indeed.
thank
He's a
you.
wuss.
That's until I'm not.
Spoken with wisdom.
Doesn't mean you always have to be. It just means that you are now.
Right. For the moment. We're all doing our best. And I think that if anything defines Pacifica Fight Back, I think that that's what it is. Either that or we can be like Mae West. When I'm good, I'm good. But when I'm bad, I'm better.
Absolutely. You are my spiritual mentor, PK, for sure. I
about-
hate the look, Paulina. Is that a real thing? Does it really look that pretty out
Nah.
there? 'Cause it's
Oh no
disgusting here.
I'm actually in my car,
Oh,
and that's just the virtual background that I inherited from Bill Crozier of all people.
oh, please. All right, let's not go there.
No, let's not even go there. Company
So,
phone.
Well,
Yeah,
let's do this. We've got, it's right at about 5. The person that I'd like to wait on, of course, is Dahlia.
no,
And-
Dolly's on. Dolly's on.
Oh, okay. How did I miss you and not greet you, Dahlia? Thank you so much. And I just want you to know that we'll take really good care of Kathy. She's with Surge here in Houston, and she's had some health problems. So she will not be with you tonight, Mimi and Michael. But I think that I'm sorry. I tried to get that beat bell off. I did all the things it told me to, but obviously I didn't do something right. But
PK, this is Paulina.
yes,
As
ma'am.
soon as I get inside, which will be in about 5 minutes, I'll
Mhm.
be able to help you with that if you make me host or co-host for a second, and I'll be able to disable that. But let me rush and let me just turn everything off, and because in order to change those settings, I think you need to be online or at least connected to the internet and with access to a browser. At least that's my
Well, I am, but if you know how to do it and I make you co-host, I can do that.
experience. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Hmm.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good. I'll be able to help you in the future.
PK, this is Sheila. I have a question.
Yes, ma'am. I got your books. You got that right.
Oh, great. Good. I'm looking at a sign now in front of me. It says about muting your call, et cetera, et cetera. And it says I'm looking at the screen of somebody else. There's a little tiny sign at the top. Is that going to stay there the whole time?
No, we're
Oh,
taking
okay.
that down. I have it up for people who are coming in.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
At some point, we will just be the gallery of all the people, but I just wanted, we haven't officially started, but almost. We've got just about everybody for the first half of it. And what I'll do is I'll have Kaya, who is my assistant, take it down. So we can give these out, this information out, but I just wanted the first people to see it. And as we officially start, Kaya, why don't you go ahead and stop your screen for right now?
Some of us are on phone only and don't have a screen.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third Pacifica Fight Back Town Hall virtual meeting. It is good to see those that are here, to let you know that this is being streamed live on Facebook under my name, Perry McCary, but I've told people that they can do watch parties if they'd like to do that, to build the audience, to have this conversation, are these conversations that are needed as it relates to the strengthening and sustainability of Pacifica Radio across the country and its more than 200 affiliates. I am going to turn this over uh, to Michael Novick and Mimi Rosenberg, both Pacificans.
You
Um,
forgot the land acknowledgement.
oh, I did, Lawrence. Thank you. But I was still going to turn it over to them and let them,
Okay.
you
All right.
introduce him.
And
So,
please put yourself on mute if you're not speaking.
yes. So, Lawrence, would you
Yeah, I could do that.
introduction for the
I want to thank my brother George Funmaker for introducing himself today. He says George Funmaker is a Dakota Honchonk, is an indigenous activist and community worker who resides in Long Beach. He's a traditional practitioner of Dakota culture and works in the Native American community where he promotes cultural revitalization and spirituality. Through his cultural work, he advocates for the preservation of sacred sites and land. George has spent time at Standing Rock as well as sacred Apache land Oak Flat. He comes from a family that has been active with indigenous struggles at Wounded Knee, 1973, as well as the spiritual movement of protecting sacred Navajo land, Dene land at Big Mountain, Arizona. George, the floor is yours. Thank you, PK.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you, Lawrence. I want to say greetings to everybody here on the call. And I want to thank Lawrence for inviting me to do a brief land acknowledgement. So I have a prepared statement that I would like to read at this time. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will. Some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life. And some have lived on this land for more generations that can be counted. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. I am standing on the ancestral, unceded lands of the Tongva Gabrielino people. We pay respects to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. We call on all artists, cultural workers, public officials, educators, administrators, community leaders, organizers, and engaged community members to open all public events and gatherings with acknowledgements of the traditional native inhabitants of the land. So I just wanted to share those words and again encourage everyone to acknowledge the traditional people of the territories that you reside in and that you work in, and to remember that everywhere you go in this country, Native people were murdered and killed, so that you all benefit from living on stolen Native land. And not only to acknowledge that, but to work with your local tribal people and to uplift their voice, because a lot of times we're forgotten, but to give us a seat at the table, and that we are sovereign nations. We're not some sub-ethnic group, but we are sovereign nations in this country. So I just wanted to thank you for inviting me again. We also, I wanted to mention our brother Leonard Peltier, who's 43 years in imprisonment, false imprisonment. So we want to free Leonard Peltier. And again, I just thank you for giving me this time to share a few words with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Are you also going to do a song, or are you going to bypass that?
I'm a little under the weather,
Okay.
but I could try my best. My singing voice is not up to par, but I'll try to sing a song. It's American Indian Movement song, honoring American Indian Movement, all of our ones who paved the way for us to be here. Russell Means, Dennis Banks, Vernon Belcourt, John Trudell. To honor all those warriors, I want to offer this American Indian Movement song.
Dakwiyatsi, which means all my relations. PK, I'll turn it over to you, Brother George Funmaker. Thank you, relative, for offering your words and your song. Thank you.
We've been blessed. I'd like to turn things over now to Michael Novak and Mimi Rosenberg. Thank you.
Yes, and all my relations. Yeah, so I'm here from KPFK Local Station Board, which is on Tongva and Chumash land in Southern California. Mimi?
Mimi Rosenberg from Brooklyn, New York. I'm a producer of Equal Rights and Justice and Building Bridges, and an activist for many years with WBAI and to maintain the Pacifica network, the People's Megaphone Community Radio.
Yeah, and that's Lenape land, I think. And I'm with Grassroots Community Radio Coalition in LA and Anti-Racist Action. So the program today, we're going to have the first segment. We've been looking at the whole question of the centrality of anti-racism. And the last town hall we did, we had Dr. Brandon Mack and Candace Weber from Black Lives Matter Houston, and Dr. Joanna Fernandez, Professor Joanna Fernandez from WBAI and the COVID Race and Democracy Show, talking about, you know, anti-Black racism in particular and its impact within progressive institutions and media. And we're going to be looking at further today. We have speakers from SURGE, which is showing up for racial justice. And with us today, Kathy from SURGE Houston could not be here, but we have Jean Kayani from the Bay Area. And Jean is one of the founders of SURGE up in that area, and also is a director of Speak Out. She's a founder and director of Speak Out, which is a nonprofit educational organization, works with college and high school students. She's taught poetry in women's federal prisons and been a longtime member of SURGE in the Bay Area, serving on their base building committee and their advisory team. And Mimi, do you want to introduce Dahlia?
Yeah, I certainly do, but I must, as a precursor, to say that I am particularly interested in Pacifica Fight Back putting together this town hall, this forum, because no matter what endeavor, what political activism we have, if we are not pledged and committed and willing to decolonize our minds as white people, to understand ourselves and fundamentally as settler colonialist relationship to our antecedents, are to people who were enslaved, to people who are the indigenous peoples of this land, then there is little that we can do to really work towards the promise of democracy. And for me, the effort and the respect for Pacifica, which it must be, and what I think Pacifica Fight Back is, it is about education, it is about agitation, it is about organizing to empower we the people for that promise of democracy. So I am particularly gratified to have heard the Indigenous opening and to Leonard Peltier and all our political prisoners, free them all, and indeed to help free my mind and others from settler colonialist sensitivities. And with that, I'd love to welcome Dahlia Ferlito, who is a white, queer, non-binary, anti-racist organizer and co-founder of White People of Black Lives, for Black Lives, and on the leadership team of Showing Up for Racial Justice. And that's just a small part of her many commitments to anti-racism. So to both of our guests, greetings and thank you for blessing us with your energies.
So just to say, we'll be spending about close to a half hour with the panelists speaking, and then we'll have about an hour for questions and answers and discussion from all the participants in the call related to the issues they're raising. And take it away, Dahlia and Jean.
Jean, did you want to go first, or do you want me to go first? I don't think we...
No, go right ahead. You go.
Okay, I'll do it. I'll take it away.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Jean, and good to see you. So good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Dahlia Ferlito. My pronouns are they, them. And as mentioned, White People for Black Lives. I am the co-founder of White People for Black Lives, and it is an anti-racist collective of white folks who are acting in solidarity with the Los Angeles chapter of Black Lives Matter. And we function as a work group of the Alliance of White Anti-Racists Everywhere, also known as AWARE LA. And we are the Los Angeles chapter of Showing Up for Racial Justice, also known as SURGE, which is a national white anti-racist network and organization. And I will say I am an avid listener of KPFK for probably more than 15 years. And I'm aware of the high level and important analysis of the quality of news that has come from this station that has helped me understand better the interlocking systems of oppression that operate domestically and globally. And this learning has largely come from your BIPOC hosts. So when White People for Black Lives says that we are in solidarity with Black Lives Matter Los Angeles and other BIPOC-led organizations, this means that we show up with and we take our cues from those who are most impacted by this white supremacist system. And this is a way we can operate both as an organizing strategy within the movement ecosystem, but also has implications for other sectors. As I understand the concerns raised that resulted in this and other forums, there is a clear need to move beyond anti-racist rhetoric, as I'm sure anyone here can define and write a thesis on cis heteropatriarchy, and likely your acumen is high for an understanding of the historical foundation of white supremacy in this country and its relationship to capitalism, militarism, and so forth. So, but this isn't about that. So I'm hearing that there is a need, a real call to democratize the station's decision-making and really address the ways in which racism shows up in this progressive space that goes beyond an academic understanding and the use of big words to describe a problem with decision-making, representation, and so forth. So what I've learned from my participation in Aware LA is that racism shows up in 4 ways: culturally, institutionally, interpersonally, and within ourselves. And we need to consistently engage in tactics that confront racism on all 4 levels simultaneously in all parts of our lives. Otherwise, change will not happen, and racism will continue to shapeshift, and the material conditions for all of us will never change. And this means in our progressive spaces especially. So all too often, white lefties will presume a lack of complicity with or benefit from white supremacy if we read all the books and if we have all the right language so that we can virtue signal to others just how down we really are for the cause. But if we aren't confronting the ways in which our behavior reproduce white supremacy, even in activist spaces or otherwise progressive spaces, then no amount of books and vocabulary will save us from harming people that we care about and are in community with. So the task before us as white people of conscience in the room is to take anti-racist action to dismantle the white supremacist system that is crushing all of us. But to be clear, we're not just talking about the brand of white supremacy that's touted by people that wear white hoods and the alt-right, or people that cover themselves in swastika tattoos or Trump supporters. It's the white supremacist system that created the racial divide, as you all know, and awarded white people both material and psychic benefits. So in this case, it's those psychic benefits that lead to behaviors that cause problems in multiracial spaces that we, as white folks, may not even be aware is happening. And so we need to move beyond the notion that white folks need more diversity training and into actually making shifts toward equity in all spheres of life. Dr. Jody Armour said to me on a panel that I was on with him a while back, if aliens came down and wiped racism from the hearts and minds of all white people tomorrow, we would still have structural inequities. We're in a historical moment where our country has to reckon with itself and decide which side of history it'll be on, and whether or not it's actually time to address those structural inequities. And so to all white people in the room, you know, we need to decide which side of history we want to be on. And I think about this really in terms of integrity. For many, if not all of us in this room, I'm sure we've all engaged in some level in social justice movements for a very long time, and which of course we need. But when I speak about integrity, what I really mean is that it can be easier to denounce and distance ourselves from the actions of active neo-Nazis and white supremacists and Trump supporters and brutal police and so forth than it is to recognize our own complicity with the white supremacist system. And Beverly Daniel Tatum said, I sometimes visualize the ongoing cycle of racism as a moving walkway at the airport. Active racist behavior is equivalent to walking fast on the conveyor belt, and the person engaged in active racist behavior has identified with the ideology of our white supremacist system and is moving with it. And passive racist behavior is equivalent to standing still on the walkway. No overt effort is being made, but the conveyor belt moves the bystanders along to the same destination as those who are actively walking. But unless they are walking actively in the opposite direction at a speed faster than the conveyor belt, unless they're actively anti-racist, they will find themselves carried along with the others. And so we need all white folks to take bold and visible anti-racist direct action to confront systemic injustice out there. But it seems that the question remains of how that is going to be turned inward into our own backyard, in progressive spaces, in order to make certain that the voices of BIPOC folks are lifted and are central. And this means it's time to do something different and facilitate structures that allow for more progressive voices to come to bear and have decision-making authority. It's also integral to have a medium available that is not willing to compromise. And just like many of you take bold, invisible, anti-racist direct action on the street, it's imperative that progressive media do the same for our airwaves. So we've seen time and again how the mainstream media can usually be relied on to perpetuate problematic and racist narratives, like the ideology that property is more valuable than Black lives. And like they usually do, they'll focus on looters and violence, and the mainstream media gives permission to a national audience of people sitting in the comfort of their own home that they too should be outraged at property damage, and diverting attention from the focus on police murders, lack of accountability, and lack of investment in Black communities. And as white people, we're often encouraged to pray for peace in times of uprising instead of working to end police brutality and invest in Black communities. So the media's call for peace is really a call for a cease in the disruption of white comfort. And we need a voice to counteract the noise of the mainstream media's attempts to distort grassroots organizing and lift up Black people expressing themselves in response to oppression and brutality in whatever forms that takes. And White People for Black Lives calls on other white people to engage in critical self-reflection and examination about the meaning of race and whiteness in our lives. Our ongoing work is to recognize the power we have been socialized to hold in all spaces, and to be honest and radical in our evaluation of the benefits we've been afforded. And the greatest tool we have toward this critical learning is our ability to listen, to take cues from and act humbly, and not assume that our way is the right and only way. We can learn the ways in which white supremacy culture shows up in our spaces and actively learn the anecdotes. We can recognize and lift up the experiences and wisdom being expressed by BIPOC folks and facilitate access to meaningful leadership. In this space, I see the need to promote and defend the voices of BIPOC dissent and media racism, and to remain uncompromising. Thank you. Turn it over to Jean.
Thank you. Thank you, Dahlia. Really appreciated that. And thank you, Pacifica Fight Back, for putting together this important panel and bringing together all of you and inviting me to participate. I'm also honored to be in conversation with all of you and also Dahlia, my colleague in Southern California. And I too have been a longtime supporter and listener, 30 years of Pacifica. I live in Berkeley actually, and love all that Pacifica can offer, and support all of your amazing work to make Pacifica even more advanced in its anti-racist presence and structures. So as Dahlia said, we're both with Surge, Showing Up for Racial Justice. What I think is really critical also, in addition to what Dahlia mentioned, is that Surge was created after Barack Obama got elected, when there was tremendous pushback, a lot of talk about being in a colorblind society, and Black organizers came to white anti-racist leaders and said, you have to organize white people. Like, this has to happen. This has never been done before in a serious way. And this has been the huge missing piece. And what followed on what Ann Braden, a really wonderful white anti-racist woman organizer from Kentucky, said that, racism has always been on the back of people of color, primarily Black folks, Indigenous folks, Latinx people, and that it really is, it's a white problem. And so it is our responsibility, because our lives depend on changing it too. So with this leadership together, the white folk, anti-racist activists, along with Black leadership, created the principles and the values of Surge and the mission. Took a couple of years to put together, and to me, they are a guidepost on how white people can show up in accountable and respectful and progressive ways, anti-racist ways. And the way that Surge functions is that it's not white people out going organizing things on their own. It's that our work must be following the leadership of people of color, primarily Black people in leadership, and developing accountability relationships with organizations in our community. we believe in resourcing those organizations for raising funds, to pay reparations to those organizations, to address the hoarded white wealth, generational wealth that the privilege and resources that white people have accumulated. And so it is in collaboration. But the big thing that we're about is to bring white people into this movement. And how do you bring more and more white people to see that they have skin in the game? That in fact, that is our humanity also depends on our addressing and dismantling not only the racist institutions and systems, but dismantling racism as white supremacist shows up in ourselves, as Dahlia so clearly had pointed out. The one thing that is really clear is that we organize out of a framework of mutual interest, that white supremacy is integral to economic injustice, to maintaining patriarchy and other forms of oppression. And we approach our organizing with a real open-hearted approach to organizing, to calling white people into the work rather than trying to create barriers to participation. And so one of the things that's really interesting for me, and I've been thinking quite a lot lately about, is the way in which white liberalism keeps white people from really fully embracing racial justice. And the more that I do organizing and understanding that it's actually white liberalism that actually keeps people, even though they see themselves as progressive, not being fully engaged. So, you know, over the past 4 years during the Trump administration, a lot of talk about how the demographic was changing and the prospect of a potentially changing racial inequality. And a lot of white conservatives were expressing, conservative supporters were talking about their fearfulness of, quote, losing their America, which they see as by rights largely a white nation. But there's been far less attention brought to the fact that many white liberals, they harbor the exact same fears. A fear of not being part of the majority and a fear of losing the privilege they were born with. And you all likely know the long history of white liberals preaching equality while being reluctant to fully embrace efforts to make society more equal in ways that might discomfort them even a little. So white liberals are often good on certain racial issues, but they may not put a lot of action behind their words, or don't go as far as they could to make racial equality a reality. So what's interesting is that when I was thinking about this was around the recent election in California, because when I look at Proposition 16, which was affirmative action, which would have removed the ban on affirmative action, reinstated for an actress in the state, it was defeated by a huge amount, 57%. At the same time, there were criminal justice reforms that actually passed, like free the vote. And it's really troubling to understand, why is it that white people show up in certain places and don't in others? And white people oppose things like affirmative action because they're not merely thinking or acting out of self-interest, but also they're concerned with protecting the interest of other whites. They might support affirmative action in the abstract, but they worry that such programs contradict their own sense of meritocracy or might harm their own children's chances of getting into a good college. So the fear that gets to the core of the hypocrisy of many white liberals is that they say they want equality and they want equity, but when things get specific, they're worried about losing what they've been handed, and especially about being treated, thinking that they're going to be treating badly as the United States has treated people of color. So what I think in Surge, in the years that I've been organizing with Surge, that this is the conversation that we try to have in the white community. It's easy for white people to focus on the people on cell phones, cell phone videos acting like racist. But there's progressive folks around the country are also some of the most tenacious supporters of white racism, and it's all done subconsciously. So often, and so what we see in Surge for us is that there can't be real change until white people are willing to give up both some power and some resources where they live, where they work. And also understanding that by giving up that power, by sharing that power actually, is that you restore your own humanity. Because what racism does to white people, as you likely many of you know, but I don't think it can be overstated, is that it devours us of our own humanity, rips us of our own humanity, because unconsciously there is this constant debasing that is taking place. And so until we can be engaged in constant work around racism, both individually and dismantling institutions, it's very difficult for change to take place. So I'd just like to say that, we all know, we're all here, that racism is a toxic system that poisons all of us in different ways. And the only way out really for white people is to first to understand the impact of current and historical racism on Black community and people of color, but the impact on ourselves. And white people need to be continually and constantly active. We need to find a political home by which we are aligned with leadership of people of color, and a home that keeps white people actively engaged and held accountable. There are a lot of white folks that stay home and read, and they got it all, like very much like Dahlia was talking about, and that's really fantastic. However, unless you are engaged and you are in a political relationship where you are being challenged and moved and have to receive feedback, have to get a really tough skin, and understanding the ways that we're showing up that are subconsciously or unconsciously racially harmful, that unless we do that on a regular basis and actively get engaged, it's pretty difficult to not stay within the kind of a status quo, be able to not move ourselves internally to dismantle the generations of racial superiority that we have inherited and has become part of our culture. So just to end a little bit is that one of the things that surges, besides just, yes, dismantling institutions, but we're about shifting culture. We're about changing white culture. We're about how do we begin to dismantle this within ourselves and with each other. So I'll leave it there and hand it over back to Terry and Michael.
Yeah, so, we were hoping to have responses and Q&A and discussion with the participants in this call. The idea was that the panel would do the presentation. I think Mimi was going to say a few words about, focusing some of the things that were said to the context of Pacifica and what we're hoping to get out of this call in terms of solving some of our problems that have arisen, within Pacific Flightback itself, within the stations, and then we would be taking your participation. So you can raise your hand in the participants panel, or if you're on the phone, I think you can indicate that you want to get stacked by pressing *9. And we'll be giving people about 90 seconds to, make comments or ask questions, and we'll give the panelists some time to respond. as well over the course of about an hour of discussion here about these questions and how they relate to Pacifica.
I'm sorry. I would look at.
Yeah, I see Mimi's got, somebody just called Mimi. So just to say that, Pacifica is in trouble as an institution. And one of the reasons it's trouble is that it's lost touch with a lot of the contemporary struggles and movements that are shaping current realities, and particularly, from people of color, Black, Indigenous, and people of color movements. And so we're trying to regain our footing in a sense, and that's got to be a self-critical process, particularly for white people involved with Pacifica. And that's what we're hoping to get out of today's discussion to advance that process. Mimi, you want to say a little more, and we'll start looking for, you're muted, Mimi.
You're muted, Mimi.
Gratitude to my comrades, Dahlia and Jean. But I must say, and thank you for the good words about Pacifica. They cannot and must not be accepted. Pacifica is a charade. It is living a lie. It has, in terms of its material conditions, from its hiring structure to its salary structure, to its programmatic content, to its governance structure, absolutely uncoupled the issues of race and class, and finds it most difficult. And I'm not concerned as much about the liberal community. I am more concerned about how the left community has habitually failed to internalize its own politics, going back to when I myself was told to go home and pay attention to my community with my arduous work in SNCC, to the admonitions from Malcolm to go home and pay attention to my own community. And it's easy to be critical of the left. It's easy to be critical of the white working class, if you will. It's much harder to be critical of our own organizations and to understand how our psyches have internalized the baggage, of course, of settler colonialism and et cetera, and then to divest ourselves of it and what it means. And that to me means both institutionally and materially divesting ourselves. So in terms of Pacifica, and this is just what I would like to really offer, that we be much harder and much more introspective about how the left has habitually failed to recognize self-determination in terms of the leadership of people of color, what it really means to be an effective ally. And that means from the African-American community, the Latinx communities, and various other communities that are subject to vapid, terrifying, dehumanizing discrimination. So I think we talk very often in generalities and platitudes, but well-intentioned. But how do we internalize that and make our own organizations look different? And I just want to, as we get ready for public comment and thought, this must be about Pacifica, because the one thing Pacifica can be, and has been for decades, is it has been a people's megaphone. It encompasses the broad array of issues and aids each one of us in our struggles, whether it's political prisoners, whether it's housing, whether it's human rights struggles, whether it's trans-based struggles, whatever it is. However, is it really? And does it have an approach that is fervently, in terms of internalizing it with its own staff and its own work conditions, anti-racist, willing to root and branch from its own poisonous soil, white supremacy in the way it functions. And the question of how to do that and how to make Pacifica into a true vehicle to weed out white supremacy, I think is partially what we should be directing ourselves to, and more specifically and less arrogantly looking at within our own context, how we become much more effective anti-racist and what that actually means. So I just want to offer that. And one last word about Pacifica. Since this is put together by Pacifica Fight Back, who is engaged in its at least second arduous fight in less than 2 years to dismantle its governance structure and supplant what exists now, which is an attempt at inclusion and true diversity in terms of the practices and policies that govern the station. We are now in the throes of, once again, a white, primarily, cisgendered, primarily, elite, hierarchical intelligentsia who wants to dismantle the governance structure, to streamline it, and inherently to make it exclusionary of the very people who most need a people's megaphone and a people's station for the issues that they have been most in need of hearing. And by liberal media, the hell with the mass media, but mass liberal media, the MSNBCs and the like, those issues have been at best sidelined, marginalized, disenfranchised, etc. And now, just as one particular thing why we need a Pacifica, you can look at the enormity of the backlash on so-called liberal media, half a dozen of whom its reporters are from The Nation magazine, Rachel Maddow, Chris Hayes, and the like. And what is their major concern? A backlash against the slogan and conceptualization of defunding the police. So, and where the hell is Pacifica in all of this? So I just want to raise that to our listeners, that this is not an exercise in intellectuality. It is an effort to really be more effective in trying to understand that the effort to dismantle our governance structure is a fundamentally racist attempt to exclude, and a discriminatory effort to exclude workers and communities of color who've been the last brought into the Pacifica chain of broadcast, to oust them altogether in favor again of a cultural elite of white intelligentsia's determination. They're all well-intentioned members of what they would consider to be the left. So I want us to think about that and how to make our organization, to claim and keep this organization, Pacifica, to keep a people's media, and to make it a truly representative anti-racist vehicle that understands the need for self-determination and how to divest itself of its own colonized mentality. So I'm passionate about your presentations. I'm educated and stimulated, and wish you folks were on the East Coast as well, specifically. So thank you. And I hope as we open it up that people will not generalize, but truly look at how we can internalize these lessons and this discourse to weed out the poison of white supremacy amongst ourselves and our own institutions.
Let me say here that this is a time, I think Mimi has asked probably 5 of the questions that some of you may have thought about asking, but I'd like you to raise your hand so that I can get a list if you're interested in making a statement. And in the meantime, Dahlia or Jean, can you respond? I see you, Ted. Could you respond a little bit to what Mimi has said so that we can get the ball rolling with the conversation? Either of you.
Go for it, Jean, if you got something to say.
Yes, Mimi, and I would say that I refer to white liberals, but I also think it's white progressives for sure. And I think that unless, well, it seems like Pacifica Fight Back is on its way. Like, you're organizing, you're you're obviously been engaged for many years. You're trying to make this happen. it is really a difficult fight. I mean, it's very difficult to move white leftists, progressives who think that they are not operating in this way. It's extremely difficult. And I personally can't at this point offer what needs to happen, although because the work that Surge does is to figure out ways that we can have these kind of really deep conversations. And I'm sensing that there is not a willingness at all by the folks at the leadership of having those kind of conversations. And so what do you do in light of that, right? How do you subvert them? How do you organize? And that's the only way I know, is to try to organize some kind of opposition to them. I have to say that the unwillingness to look at the way in which white supremacy carries itself out with us, each of us individually as white people, is why it has existed for 500 years. So I want to just leave it there. Dahlia, can you offer anything right now?
Sure. I mean, I'll just add that I dropped a link into the chat for it's a reading on white supremacy culture, and it describes in detail how white supremacy culture can show up in organizations, and then offers antidotes to that. And so there might be an opportunity there to do some deep reflection and see what the possibility is for this group, who seems to be the organized resistance, to try to create policies or practices to really fight against what has, transpired among the leadership and the changes among the leadership. So I just wanted to offer that as a tool, and also affirm that, if this was easy, you all would have been successful by now with the amount of work that you all have been doing, the amount of expertise that's already existing in this room, and the fact that you all are not as successful as you would like to be, just really is a testament to the power of how white supremacy is so firmly rooted into the psyches of white folks and white progressives, which is, it's sad. And I just recognize that how hard it is, because now you're trying to talk to people who think that they already have it together and they already know things. And that's why I was trying to speak to that in my opening, of just like trying to ground folks in the fact that just because you might have that analysis and you might be on the streets for Black Lives Matter, doesn't mean that you are somehow free of acting in ways that perpetuate harms from white supremacy. And so it's really trying to get at the root of what's going on in the behaviors that are causing the problems, and then holding people accountable to those specific behaviors. And that is a huge task for you all to carry out among people who think that, they're already kind of on our side, or on the side of liberation, right?
The one thing I would just add.
I was just going to say, we have 4 people on the stack right now. 5. Let's get to the questions. The first one is Ted Weisel.
I was really going to defer to other people, but if you want me to go, I will. For those who don't know me, I have been part of this Pacifica struggle since the writing of the bylaws about 20 years ago. Even before that, I was arrested at San Francisco State during the struggle to create the College of Ethnic Studies 50 years ago, or 51 years ago. And that College of Ethnic Studies is producing many dividends, especially recently with the role they're playing to get the San Francisco City Schools to introduce, not as an elective, but as a requirement, the studies of African-American studies all the way from kindergarten through high school. I am a member of an education committee of a Rotary Club, let me emphasize Rotary International, and our committee meets 2 times a week. We were involved in meetings with a member of the Texas State Board of Education as he was helping to craft legislation that passed unanimously during the last legislative session to make African American studies an elective in Texas state schools. That's good. It's not good enough. The fact that African American studies and Mexican American studies, really ethnic studies, is not required in all schools, not only in Texas, but throughout the country, is what I think we have to aim for. Perhaps the world, really. When we talk about institutionalized racism, the failure to air this conversation is an example of the failures of our own institutionalized racism. We need to let our listeners know that the beginning, or at least a key point in this whole struggle, is to start educating kids in kindergarten and continuing all the way through high school the truth about American history.
Ted, I'm sorry, I don't mean to, can we, because there are a lot, we've got like 6 people now that needed to, and I realize that we all have been a little long-winded, but can you get to a question that maybe our panelists can ask or answer or comment on?
They can comment on everything I have just said.
Okay. Do either?
If I may, I don't know that our panelists need to comment on,
Yes.
you know, that's their prerogative. I think we should try to take an array of callers so that we can get their voices in and see the profundity and searching of their wit and wisdom as well.
Okay, that's a great point. I'm not going to censor anyone, but we have to realize that there's more than one person here, and we've got a pretty good group. The number 424-273-0222. If you'll unmute yourself, your question or comment. Polina is next, then Michael, then Lawrence, and then 801. So I'm keeping the list. 424. Can you unmute?
*6, I think.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. This is a longtime KPFK listener, member, volunteer. My name is Andrew, and I am in the process of forming what I think is much needed to strengthen our station, and that would be a member group, a member coalition that will work to empower the listeners, to open up communication between listeners, staff, and the board, and to support the station, the staff, and the board in order to strengthen our wonderful KPFK station, as well as to encourage other sister brother stations to do the same, form listener coalitions. People who are interested can contact me in the following 2 ways. By phone number, the number is area code 310-869-0709, and leave a voicemail only. Again, the phone number is 310 area code 869-0709. Please leave a voicemail with your contact information. Again, my name is Andrew. I will give an email address. I am the founder and coordinator of the Whole Earth Cooperative, which is a living cooperative that supports diversity, shared decision-making, living in an eco-friendly manner, and building community. And that email address is wholeearthcoop@gmail.com. Again, that's wholeearthcoop@gmail.com. And I will spell that quickly. That is WHOLEARTHCOOP Whole Earth Co-op @gmail.com.
Andrew,
And
thank
I
you.
will leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank Ted. And I believe Paulina was our next on the stack.
Yes, yes. Paulina, unmute.
Seems to be having trouble unmuting.
Second to unmute myself. My apologies. I was looking at the document that Dahlia shared with us, and it's very, very useful to me personally. So thank you for that. And as far as Pacifica is concerned, my main question would be, well, there'd be two. One, how do we deal with the fact that first of all, white supremacy is a structure, and white supremacy uses people of color. So, for instance, our radio station is full of figureheads of color, right? We have a Black PD, an African American GM, and so on and so forth. But whose interests, at least, and I don't mean to personalize, but seem to be aligned with the those of the structure, those of the patriarchy, those of um, the ones in the capitalist class, the ones in power. Now, that's on the one hand. On the other hand, there's absolutely almost no presence of Asian Americans in Pacifica, at least not in positions of power, and not so much either in terms of voices, producers. So I'm wondering if people here on this call who are producers would be interested in actively pursuing bringing on, giving up, let's say you have a show, giving up 5 minutes of your time to bring in young voices every week, however often you have your show, to share, to literally practice what we're preaching, right? To share the airwaves, to start passing on the baton in that way. I'm wondering if that practice has been implemented, if anybody has that experience of bringing in young voices to produce a segment. I don't know if if there's anything that could be suggested or that's been practiced, proven, and has worked in the past, because I think that's what Pacifica needs, practice what we preach.
Can I just make a procedural recommendation that we maybe take 3 more comments, etc., or questions, and then perhaps go back to our panelists to see if they want to respond, and then continue?
That's fine. That's fine with me.
I think you're next.
Oh,
Mr. Mayor.
okay.
I think I was.
I think Michael is next.
Yeah,
And then Laura.
talking.
Apologize.
I put myself on the stack as opposed to trying to be a coordinator. But I want to say a couple of things. I think that what I believe it was Dahlia said earlier. No, Gene, I guess, spoke about the vote on affirmative action here in California, and it's I think it's very significant when the current Pacifica bylaws were being adopted. There was an effort to incorporate affirmative action into the bylaws of Pacifica, and although there were a lot of other democratic changes, that one was actually voted down by one vote on one local advisory board, basically, and left out. But we do have committees of inclusion from the Pacifica National Board at each of the 5 stations that are supposed to play a role in making sure that communities, underserved and underrepresented communities, are incorporated into the management, the governance, the programming, the functioning of the stations. And I think that we have fallen down in really having those. So if there are people on this call who might want to participate in such committees, you can get in touch with your local station board. I do think that some examples of why I appreciate Surge so much. I was involved with anti-racist action for a long time, and it's always easier to get white people to come out against the neo-Nazis or against the Ku Klux Klan and not think about the self-critical aspects. And I think that what's important about Surge is not just the self-criticism, but it's responding to the priorities that are established by Black Lives Matter by different Black and Indigenous people of color as to what kinds of actions to take and what constitutes anti-racism. And I think that that's what Pacific has to take to heart in terms of its programming, in terms of providing, we talked about the megaphone, but who controls the megaphone and what is magnified and promoted over that megaphone, I think has to be prioritized by the issues of survival that, Indigenous people, Black people, the immigrant population, Mexicano, Chicano forces, Central Americans, Mesoamericans, those are pressing issues. For too long, Pacifica spent 4 years of Trump thinking that somehow being anti-Trump would be our ticket to success. And no, the Washington Post deals with anti-Trump, the New York Times deals with anti-Trump, and people who just want anti-Trump are satisfied with that. And so Pacifica has actually lost listeners over the last 4 years by not engaging itself with people who are demanding much, much more than, Trump must go. And I think we need to take that to heart.
I agree with that.
Who is
So
that?
I'll stop, but thank you.
Lawrence, you're next.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank Jean and Dahlia for their presentations, and Mimi and Michael. There is racism in Pacifica. Pink elephant in the room. The Grassroots Community Radio Coalition here in Los Angeles, we had a town hall that was packed to the rafters, standing room only, and it was called Racism in Pacifica in progressive media. Now, I know some would not want to hear that. I know some of my white accomplices, as I call them, I don't call them allies, I call them white accomplices, would not want to hear that. But one of the things that that George referred to is the whole aspect of decolonizing, and the fact that a lot of these policies, we have no young people. We have stale Euro-descent people on the mics throughout the Pacifica network. And that's a problem, because we are keeping young activists and people who are relevant in these times right now from being able to address the struggles that they are engaged in. Now, we know the through the prison pipeline mainly affects BIPOC people, and a lot of that is a systemic system of white supremacy that is ingrained in the capitalist and imperialist system in the United States, as I say. So we need to continue to decolonize ourselves. And one of the reasons I raised my hand, there was a mention that we haven't had any victories. Well, I belong to the KPFK LSP and the Pacifica National Board, and we have had victories. We have been able to sustain the network with very little, knowing that we are in crisis. We have been able to sustain the network as a governance body. And the other thing we were able to do was the defeat a bylaws referendum that would have usurped the whole democratic processes that now exist in Pacifica. So we have a group that is proposing another bylaws referendum to again usurp the democracy from listeners and the Pacifica network. And that group is called New Day Pacifica, which I believe they perpetrate, regardless of the paint jobs they have on their coalition. These people are intent on either ruling or ruining this network. So I think that's one of the things that I understand, the premise that you both provided, but we have had victories, and we are still, the fact that we are in struggle is a victory in its own. The fact that we are actively in struggle is a victory. And that's, I think, one of the things that is missing. Our brother with the numbers ending 6619, can you please mute yourself? Because you're coming through. I just want to say that, I mean, we have victories. We defeated the bylaws referendum better than 2-1, and we are going to defeat the new usurpation proposal in regards to the bylaw. So again, there is racism in Pacifica, and a lot of that is led by progressive communities, both white you will descend people and also people of color, because there are paint jobs when it comes to people who are part of the network. So I just want to say that I appreciate your presentation. But Dahlia, we have had victories, and the fact that we are still in the struggle is a victory. And Fight Back is expressing that movement. Thank you, Pete.
Okay, 801-380-6649. Thank you for your patience. Can you unmute? And then Grace Aaron is next.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. This is Jay Winter Nightwolf. I was the only Native American broadcaster at WPFW for 21 years. I had a very high population of people that listen from all over the world. Racism is alive and well within the Pacifica Foundation. I am a victim of that racism. The only Native American to ever hit the airwaves of WPFW or anywhere else in Washington, D.C. I was suspended and terminated by this program director, Katia Stitt, only because I made her mad. And it's really a shameful thing for Pacifica to run around telling everybody about we're the voice of the voiceless. I raised over close to $1 million in 21 years there for WPFW. I was suspended, and I was also eventually terminated by the same woman without a just due. I did not have an opportunity to represent myself in any conversation with Pacifica or WPFW. And I would like to know, how do you all feel about that? The only Native American. That's what I want to know. And what justice is there for me as a successful programmer and now a national television show host, and with one of the very powerful, most powerful podcasts out of Native America. And for Pacifica to allow this kind of behavior by a woman that just don't like me. That's my question. And you're talking about racism. If that's not racism, I don't know what it is. I've been an activist for over 50 years, and I can recognize racism maybe 3 or 4 miles away before it turns the corner. I was also an EEO investigator for the federal government as an outside contractor. I want to know how Pacifica is going to address this issue that I have with their racist policies.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate you. Grace Aaron, you're next. And I don't see any other hands. I think that we may need to go back to our panelists, but I'll come to you maybe after Grace.
Okay, it's sad to hear that, the last caller. At any rate, I'll go on to what I was planning on talking about. First of all, there are program evaluation policies that would answer Paulina's question to some extent, and the last caller's situation. They were adopted by the Pacifica National Board in June of 2017, and they include having as a positive point in any program evaluation, apprenticing other people as part of the show, including having those apprentices have some on-air visibility. So now what I was going to say in terms of racism, as the mother of 2 adult sons, and knowing many white people and others, of course, I can tell you that one of the primary keys to the continuing racism or actions that are racist have to do with education. If you have a 4 or 5-year-old child and you're white, most white people will use their privilege to get their kids a good education, because very few want to sacrifice their own children and send them to schools that are just subpar. So this situation with education should be addressed, because people care about their children, and you can't undo a bad education at 10, 12, 13 years old. Once your child has not been taught how to read and write, has not learned math, et cetera, and I'm not blaming this, I'm blaming this on the institutional racism of defunding education in minority communities. But we need to grapple with the fact that this is a practical, you cannot ask people to sacrifice their own children to correct a situation that will not be corrected in the short term. This is something that has to be corrected as best as possible, but will not overnight. If you have a 5-year-old and they're going to school next week, the whole racist school system is not going to be rectified by the time your kid starts school. So this is a very important thing, and Pacifica can do something about this. What we can do about this is we have HD channels. Right now, most children are not in school. We can provide education on our airwaves and somehow create an infrastructure to allow education with school districts to be aired on the radio. Now, many people don't have access to the internet, but everybody more or less has a radio. And if we can have engaging educational programming on our HD, some of our stations have HD channels, or subcarrier, whatever, we can get HD channels, and we can help educate the children. And this would be one step to slowing down the basic reasons that people act in a racist manner. It's in LA, for instance, the Asian community has increased the property values in school districts that have good performance results. This is a community that will do a huge amount of sacrifice financially in order to have their children go to a high-performing school. Of course, that community, to a great degree, has the wherewithal to do that, and racism in the society makes it very difficult for underserved Black and Latino communities to do the same thing. But the desire of every person, every parent, for an excellent education for their children is so strong. And I think that anything we can do, including starting programs of white retirees to tutor students in underserved communities to bring up their educational levels, would be so appreciated. This is one way to get progressives to do something positively and to understand the systemic racism, because they'll see it once they're starting to interface with children in those communities. They will understand the problems, and that will do more than any amount of lectures. And so that's really all I have to say. Care about the children. We don't talk enough about children in Pacifica. We don't have enough airtime geared to thinking about children and planning for the next generation.
Okay, great.
Programming. But thank you.
We're running out of time.
It went on so long. Okay.
Yeah. All right. We've got to do a better job of understanding the time frame so that we can let other people in. I think the next person was Mimi, but Mimi, I'd like to get to those who haven't spoken and then come back to you, because you're the moderator, so you can change anyway. There's Nick, there's Ann, and there's Armando. Armando, why don't you go next? Then Ann. The second part of this starts in about 10 minutes, and we wanted to show you a video. So,
this is Bella, and I have been raising my hand a long time.
Oh, you know what, Bella? I thought you were clapping. That wasn't a hand raise. I thought you were clapping. I apologize. I thought you were clapping. I didn't realize you.
I will mute myself.
Okay. Do you mind waiting a little bit, or Armando, may Bella go first? I thought she was clapping.
Yeah, there's a raised hand function in the participants panel. That was the reaction you were using. That's the applause.
Yeah, and it was always at the right time. So I thought.
PK, can I just make a procedural suggestion now?
Sure.
That we take a stack of the next 5 or 6 people and cut it, get a final response from our panelists then, and then move on. Unless we want to forego the other part of the program and just continue the discourse, but we should make some decision. But my own preference would be to take 3 or 4 comments and
okay.
to think about moving on.
We have Armando, Rachel, and Bella. Bella's going next, and Nick, who asked if there was time. Nick, if you don't mind going last, I will get this party started. But Bella,
and may I claim a minute at the end?
Yes, Bella, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists. Incredible work, insight, very instructional, educational, right on. I'm horrified as to what happened to this gentleman that just spoke earlier, Native American, who was pushed out of the WPFW. I am with KPFK, and I was there helping to draft a set of bylaws between 2001 and 2003, which should have been ratified by the network. Instead, the set letter A was pushed by then those people in power. And some of those people are still in power. I will say no more. So we have been living with this inheritance of a very bad set of bylaws. And recognizing that, I have been very vociferous calling for a bylaws convention. I am also the chair of the outreach committee at KPFK. During that hour, 2 hours, and sometimes we go for 2.5 hours, there's not enough time to let people speak up and speak up against the current bylaws. That does not mean that we have to allow external forces to come in and take over and dismantle what we have been diligently working for. However, having said that, while allowing the Democratic Party to continue to control the dialogue at Pacifica Foundation, which is has been a liberal complete control, it is the reason why we find ourselves in very difficult times. So Andrew came before you a few moments ago, and he announced the formation of this new group, which will be limited to membership only. Now, this group will grow, and I advise you to pay attention, because once this group grows, demands will be made, and those demands will have a tie-in, and that will mean that donations and pledges will be withheld until those demands from the membership are met. And when we find ourselves with a general manager at KPFK that refuses to listen, these demands will be met one way or another. So speaking of being bold, taking bold action, since we are being hamstrung, we have to take the necessary actions. And this is how we can bring Pacifica from the other side, the membership side, to do the right thing. But I wanted to say that an address to the listeners on a weekly basis is part of the demand, which will rotate between management and paid and volunteer staff simultaneously every week, and also demand the board conducts a weekly program to interact, and these are call-in sessions with the membership and the listeners. And at no way will these people be allowed to host. They will be hosted by 2 members elected by that group, that listener membership group. So these are careful instructions. Also, we want the PNB to hold its own. So that group interacts with every single area. So if every station follows foot, then we can start this union, group, coalition, whatever. But to make the demands needed to shift from where we are to where we need to be. I would say more, but we need to liberate our airwaves at KPFK, controlled by paid programmers on air. Once we eliminate that and we reduce our block of airtime known as strip programming, we will liberate our airwaves, have the space to also develop our news department, which has suffered many years. So all of this is what we need to do. Thank you very much.
Bella, feel free to put some of this, like Andrew did, in the chat. I tried to put some of it in there.
Very good. Thank you.
Armando, and Rachel, and Nick, and then we're going to go back and close this. We've only got 3 minutes, but if it's okay with everybody, let's make it 7 and see if we can do 8 minutes and see if we can do it this way. Armando, I don't want to take anything from you because everybody has gotten to say what they needed to say. And this is what we call equity. This is what equity is all about. But go ahead, Armando. Thank you for waiting.
Thank you. I'm pleased that Bella had a chance to go before me, because the comment I want to make is an attempt to represent the less informed. I'm referring to myself, the less informed supporter of our local station and the network. You know, I'm kind of a newbie. I've attended one of the outreach committee meetings that Bella helped put together, and this is my first exposure to this group. You know, I'm just a listener and a local supporter, and it's a little bit like, you know, drinking from a fire hose to try to understand the dynamics of what's going on and where the problems are and what the solution or solutions might be. And so I was pleased to hear the more specifics around what actions need to be taken so that folks like me that are trying to figure out how to be helpful know how to plug in and invest resources. You know, someone like me, and I'm airing this so that folks that are in kind of the leadership roles of this movement understand where folks like me are coming from. You know, I would appreciate any efforts to keep things simple and, you know, educate us on what the problem is or what set of problems exist, and the proposals to address them, so that we can get to some of these structural issues and institutionalized racism and all of these other kind of governance related barriers to needed reform. So that's my 2 cents. I appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts.
Thank you very much, Armando. Anne? Garrison, can you unmute?
Yeah, sorry. Hey, I came to this late. I missed the beginning, so excuse me if there's anything inappropriate about my remarks as a result. But all I really want to say is that if Pacifica focuses in too singular a manner on racism, then it risks collapsing into the Democratic Party narrative, a problem that several other people here have mentioned. And I would like to see more of a commitment to opposing racialized capitalism. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Rachel?
Hi, everyone. I'm going to make this really quick. I was only able to get on a little before 7. I'm going through a personal thing. So I was on a meeting, but just some background about me. I was a former producer at BAI, and I'm a listener, and I still give money. I'm going to ask a question. I'm not necessarily looking for an answer, but lately, in terms of the airwaves of BAI, there's been lots of producers taken off the air without any due process at all. And there's many things at BAI that I'm very concerned about. But my main question for this Zoom is, I'm wondering if anyone, and again, I'm just throwing this out into the air, pardon, there's no pun intended. If this Zoom is going to be aired on any of the Pacifica stations that anyone knows of, because the management at BAI, as far as I know, and Mimi, please correct me, and Bob and John, please correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I missed something. Has said virtually nothing on the air about New Pacifica. They did put out an email that if you sign the petition to like unsign it, I responded to them a while ago, but I'm very concerned in terms of democracy that the management, at least at BAI, and again, I can't speak for the other stations, is not letting the listeners know about this. And I don't feel really morally conscious to contribute money to a radio station where I disagree with a lot of the decisions that are being made. And the LSB at BAI, I've learned of late, is in the pocket of the PD and the IPD and the program manager, the GM. So that's my concern, that this Zoom is not going to be aired, like, maybe not in real time, obviously, but there's no one informing the listeners, and I don't think that's fair. And I think that, it just angers me. I will be quiet now because I know other people are on the stack. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Rachel. Nick?
Greetings. I started listening to WBAI back, I think it was in the 67, 68. And I remember hearing Che Guevara when he was at the UN in New York, and all the stuff that went on back then. And that really affected my whole life to this day. What I would love to see is a Pacifica that can have that kind of effect on people who are teenagers. And unfortunately, as time goes by, things tend to ossify. I was very impressed with how diplomatic Dahlia was at the beginning of this event, when she praised the years of experience that were here ahead of her. But in a nutshell, what I would love to see, and I don't know how we can make it happen, we might need a whole new board of genuinely radical, progressive, enlightened, woke people. But what I would like to see is for Pacifica and BAI in particular to become more of a multimedia platform, so that there is room for dozens, scores, hundreds of new, young, tech-savvy people to come in, not just tech-savvy, but morally, righteously, politically, profoundly, positively radical people, and do blogs and multimedia, YouTube and Zooms, and all under the umbrella of a genuinely progressive, radical, loving Pacifica, transformative set of values that would be coordinated. And also another little pet peeve in 10 seconds. I listened to BAI in the fundraising. So much of it are premiums geared to people with money who can afford to spend $100 or $200 on a set of tapes or books or something. Whatever happened to $15? Anyway, So I would just like to see Pacifica revamp itself in terms of the 21st century, because one person with a popular blog who's really talented and good and creative can reach 1 million people a week who might chip in $1 each on the average, and there go all your budget problems. The radio, the way we're doing it now, I don't think is working. And what do you really can't just fire 100 older people that are entrenched in their time slots. We need to expand and to transform. And I will shut up. I think I'm over my 90 seconds.
Thank you very much, Nick. I think you all need to hire me. And then if you hire me, we get this problem started. But the problem is that we are not diverse in our actions. We still think that our particular brand of bullshit doesn't stink. And I didn't want to not listen to everybody. The whole point of bringing Dahlia and Jean and Brandon and Joanna and Candace is because they're telling you what would happen if you don't. This is as much a danger to white people as it is to every BIPOC person on the planet. It is to your detriment not to get the talents and gifts of all these people you're talking about. I know them. I work with them. And I just finished talking to 20 of them today. I don't know what else to say, is that you have the tools and you have the resources and people. Why aren't we doing it? That's my question. I want to thank Dahlia and Jean. If you'd like to have a last minute, and I'll turn it over to Mimi. But thank you. Thank you for doing this work. It gives me a little bit of hope as an African-American woman, almost 70 years old. I can see a chink in the armor of white supremacy, but somebody's got to kick it in and melt the rubbish down. That's my 2 cents. Mimi, Jean, Dahlia, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. I just want to say that what we try to do today is the critique is lovingly given to an institution that must be preserved and must be enhanced. And we want to create the opportunity for the listeners, for the communities to have the maximum say and determination of what that institution looks like, its policies, its practices, and what it sounds like. And from the mouths of the people who are most affected by the policy, the movers and shakers in those communities. And that needs to be understood. So there is an internal struggle. There is a struggle that has to do with workers in the station, and that is unpaid workers, whom I was part of forming a union with, which was disbanded. The Association of Unpaid Staff, we are workers, blood, sweat, and tears to prove it. We create the value. So there has to be the internal thing to benefit the workers, to deal with the grievance procedures and so on that don't exist. There have to be a set of protocols that really deal with grievances around human rights-based issues and trainings and hiring and so on, and a heightened kind of scrutiny about discrimination within the station. It is one of the most backward institutions that I've ever worked for, and I do a good bit of employment law, among other things. And we have zero that protects against any form of discrimination. So lovingly, there is the internal struggle to humanize, democratize, and to represent and strengthen the rights of workers, and to involve even more the communities and give them a more fundamental stake, not just in paying for the institution, but what the institution sounds like. That's one thing. And the final thing, though, please understand, we will never get to that point if New Day Pacifica, who is trying to change the entire governance structure to change the bylaws for the second time around, prevails. Because the very nature of that organization, and frankly, this is what this forum is about, to enlist and recruit people to work against New Day Pacifica and to keep a democratic structure that needs to be enhanced and democratized, because that is the definition of democracy. It is not frozen, etc. So we need you all to become involved in that and to understand that the New Day Pacifica efforts to change the bylaws are first and foremost exclusionary. They exclude workers having a say in their work site. They exclude people of color. They exclude they exclude women. There is no affirmative approach to including and broadening the representation. It would be analogous to where they want to go, and I will complete, to understand that what they would do is they would keep the Senate and eliminate the House of Representatives. They do not want a people's body. They want a hierarchy to establish and replicate their own cultural sensitivities. So whatever you take away from here, as we need to continue and institutionalize the struggle against white supremacy and the struggle against all forms of discrimination. The disabled do not have a role in BAI. Their one program was totally eliminated, and on and on. Discrimination exists there. We need to deal with it. Disrespect for workers, all of that. So dear sisters and brothers, take one thing away. Pacifica Fight Back wants to continue to engage this struggle to democratize what we have and make it function better and root out discrimination. And in order to do that, we must defeat the wolf at our door, which is New Day Pacifica, which would dismantle the fundamental structure that even allows for this kind of discourse to happen and gives us a foot in the door to try to come up with really representative government of we, the peoples, to make the policies and practices that are going to lead to far better and more inclusive programming, which is the function of this media network. So I really thank you and urge you to put our sentiments behind New Day Pacifica, Pacifica Fight Back to defeat New Day Pacifica so we can enhance a really important 60+ year institution.
Well, that's the next session, I think, that we need to.
I understand, but that has to be what we take away from here, because this can't be and it isn't the end of the discussion. No, it is the beginning of the understanding of the need.
Let PK do the segue.
Yeah. No, in no way. Again, Jane, Dahlia.
I just want to say one thing, PK, just to end. Just from listening to everyone, it's clear that it needs a really deep organizing strategy. I mean, that basically it's, clarifying your common goals, framing strategies for action, building leaders within the group, and then mobilizing the community. And it's a straightforward organizing situation. And that's, because people there's so much stuff all over, at least what I'm hearing. So much has to be done, but clarifying some very specific beginning goals that you can, as you said, you've had some victories. Okay, what is the most important things right now? And using community organizing strategies to do that. And it just seems that that's really what's so critical right now.
Amen. I wanted to
thank
everybody for lending their voice, telling us the pitfalls that are surrounding us, station to station, and not even talking about the 200 plus affiliates who represent a wide berth of and a plethora of issues that need to be solved. But again, Jean and Dahlia, thank you so much for
Thank
doing
you.
what you did for us tonight.
Yeah.
I'd like
Thank
to
you.
give them a round of applause.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all.
I will be
All right, good luck.
out to you, and we need to check on Kathy.
Sure. Okay, good luck.
The next section is really to talk about governance and sustainability. And, you know, one of the things that was talked about at the beginning of this was about the bylaws. And we have an individual that we would like to speak to that. And then let's go into a community conversation after the second part of it, which is to talk about New Day Pacifica and its cost to us at the very end. Without money, we can't do anything. We know that to be a fact. I am going to co-moderate this with Lawrence Reyes. And is Mr. Riley available?
Yeah, he's there.
Yeah, he's here. He's here.
Oh, down in the corner somewhere, but thank you so much, John. If you could launch us into this conversation of governance, I'd appreciate it. And as we kind of asked the question whether or not people wanted to weigh in on after he talks, and then when Paulina and Mara come, weigh in after they talk. So I just like to ask for a kind of consensus that we can do it that way. And then I think that we can stay on track with where the conversation is being led. Governance first. So thank you, John.
Hi, hi everyone. It's nice to be here. So what I wanted to do is to kind of draw from the past to set up the conversation about some of the features of the current bylaw systems and like how we got to the current bylaw system. And I'm taking this from a chronology that I put together with Bob Lederer with, you know, the help of a number of sources that were pre-existing and then those that we did ourselves. But important milestones were from 1991 to 1992, Pacifica management drafted a mainstream oriented national program strategy. And they acknowledged in that grant applications they made to, and which were later rejected by such corporate foundations as the Pew, Ford, and MacArthur foundations. And this mainstreaming national programming strategy was approved in 1993. And there's a series of events that happened at all 5 of the stations that were, you know, where Pacifica used censorship, purges, and usurpation of power. And in May of 1992 in Houston, for example, Pacifica named Barry Forbes as the KPFT manager. And Forbes altered or canceled numerous programs he termed to be on, quote, the far left of your radio dial, close quote. And during the spring fund drive after that, listenership plummeted by 18% and donations dropped by 32%. In the fall of 1992, the Houston station manager axed shows hosted by 37 out of 90 hosts, including several serving communities of color. The Women's Action Mobile Coalition presented the Houston station management with 1,000 petition signatures protesting the format changes. In June of 1993, dissident Los Angeles KPFK staff picketed Pacifica National Board meeting to protest the removal of African American programs. And then in October of 93, over a 3-day or 4-day period, the acting Washington, D.C. station manager, Tom Porter, resigned over the undemocratic nature of the hiring process for the permanent position. He was an interim. And hours after he resigned, programmers went on the air with a special program about the crisis, which infuriated Pacifica's executive director, David Solnicker, who took the station off the air for 3 days, which violated FCC rules. And in what activists called a coup, the DC station returns to the air with a new Pacifica appointed manager, again, without democratic process. In July of 1995, the Pacifica National Board Executive Committee announced vast changes in Pacifica's program direction and urged local advisory board members who were dissidents to resign. In August of 1995 in Berkeley, there was a massive purge of programmers, including many leftists, particularly people of color. In July of 1999, a few years later, the PNB planned to vote on the sale of the Berkeley station exposed by a dissident board member. And that, of course, caused a big uprising in Berkeley that attracted national attention. At least it attracted the attention of everyone within Pacifica. So these events and many others contributed to the thinking of those that drafted the new bylaws. And some of the features that were incorporated into the new bylaws were that the approval of a list of candidates for station managers by the local station board had to be made. And so nobody could be hired that wasn't on that list. So that meant they had to be interviewed by the local station board. Powers of the local station boards to evaluate these station managers, which include both the general manager and the program director, and make recommendations about their continuation or not. Actually, with the program director, yeah, they can do that too. But anyway, the election of local boards through proportional representation was another new feature of the system, so that not one viewpoint was represented and no others, which in the sort of general US system is not proportional by any means. And local boards approving representation of their national board representatives would happen annually. So nobody would go on for years and years without another vote. Their terms automatically end and new terms begin. Local boards, then the prohibition of the executive director of the foundation from firing a manager without the consent of the local board, and a mechanism for resolving deadlocks was included. A provision for the recall of local board members by staff and listeners as a way of maintaining control of the membership. And then there were repeated areas within the bylaws that call for a fair process for dealing with unpaid producers. And then one of the important provisions, all of these are important provisions, but fundamental provisions is the prohibition of the sale of a station without a membership vote. And that is, incredible. And there's been many calls for, or there's been several calls for sale of stations by the PNB, the old PNB that existed prior to the 2002 period, where even WBAI was discussed as being one of the stations to be sold. So that's kind of how these bylaws came together. They came together out of a struggle of a grassroots people to reclaim their network. And we're going to have to defend it. That's it.
Okay. PK, you're muted.
Okay,
my apologies in segueing this, that you know, John, you've been a long-term WBAI programmer. You're a longtime queer and AIDS activist, and your programming out FM has been well listened to. I just want to say thank you. I talked to my committee members. We're going to go ahead and have all the presenters, because their time slot is a little easier to maintain than when people start asking questions and comments. So I'd like to, is Mara on?
Yeah, PK, can I
Yeah.
introduce Mara?
Yeah,
Real quick.
I'm here.
Okay, you can introduce both Mara and Paulina.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Thank you, PK. So tonight we're gonna hear from Mara Rivera, a longtime KPFA listener, and she's with the Rescue Pacifica contingent of the Fight Back Coalition. And then we will hear from Paulina Basilia, who's a doctor. She's a language interpreter, and she's also a Spanish language programmer on KPFK, and she's also a local station board member for KPFK and the Pacifica National Board Director. So we're gonna go to Myra first, Paulina, then you go. Is that okay? Thank you. Go ahead, Myra. You're on.
Okay. So when you understand the purpose of these ill-advised bylaws, which Paulina, I think, is going to go into more, and which you may have studied already, you may wonder who's behind them and why. I've been observing governance events at KPFA for decades now and have some answers. I'll speak about my station, KPFA, because I know the most about it. KPFA and Pacifica's history has always been one of a struggle to fulfill the mission of free speech and fair governance, fraught with heartbreaking betrayals by management staff, and more recently at KPFA, even within the pro-democracy forces themselves. The bylaws we have now were, excuse me for reading this, but I'm not a good speaker. I'm a better reader, I think. The bylaws we have now were crafted in the wake of changes and a takeover attempt by the Democratic Party and other functionaries, culminating around 1999, the result of which were that we sued in court, actually won, and ended up with a new set of bylaws recognizing the key role of listenership in directing the stations and network, a democratic governance structure in which minority opinions were empowered over the more usual winner-take-all structure, and safeguards against future takeover attempts. But the battle goes on still. These three bylaws attempts are the latest manifestations. The rationale for them is a faulty narrative of why the present system doesn't work. The real story is different. From the start at KPFA, those opposed to democratic governance and some others resisted governance by the LSBs and the Semi-Democratic Program Council. A small core of the paid staff has been making most of the decisions, and they were not about to give it up. They have insisted that professionals, quote unquote, themselves and management govern, and the LSBs fundraise, as is the case with corporate boards of directors. They had two main strategies to press their case. One was to obstruct the LSBs from governing by disrupting meetings, and the other to bankrupt station and network. What looked like stupidity and incompetence was actually a policy of ignoring finance because they intended to end up in bankruptcy court where they could avoid a membership vote to sell KPFA and have a good chance to buy it for pennies on the dollar. So the closer to broke they could make it, the closer to grabbing it. In the meantime, the core staff had been joined in coalition with mainly the Wellstone Democratic Renewal Club. While the core staff news department wanted their job trust, the Wellstones wanted the station to conform to a more moderate, quote, outlook and dump the programs their, quote, major donors couldn't allow, the most radical programs. We have seen our general manager and program director drop at least 5 such programs with no discussion, little notice to the longtime programmers, and years of the archives seemingly destroyed. This gives us a foretaste of the changes we could expect should these folks take over KPFA. The KPFA news department, which has long produced the news, has been the most complained about program on KPFA by listeners who wanted more progressive news. And it has become increasingly right-wing and oriented to the Democratic, with a big D, agenda, despite these protests. Secrecy and deceptions have characterized the actions of this opposition group. It was discovered by one of our LSB members in 2015 that 2 members of the opposition had applied to found a nonprofit corporation called the KPFA Foundation 3 years earlier without having ever mentioned it to their LSB or the Pacifica National Board. When confronted with this information, they claimed it was important to, quote, save KPFA if and when the station and network went bankrupt, which incidentally they had been attempting to do. This behavior violated their delegates and directors' duty of care toward KPFA and Pacifica. In other words, a hostile takeover has been in the works. Some of our pro-democracy faction were persuaded to seek unity with them through scare tactics which exaggerated the insolvency purposely created by them and served the interests of those, in any case, a new secret attempt was made by one of their leaders called the Big Tent, a secret appeal to celebrities to form a shadow board which would not need to make policies or fundraise or even meet oftener than once a year. So who would do the governing? Guess. When this was discovered, the executive director asked the person to resign. Only her LSB could do this, but would not, since that faction has the majority rule. Secrecy, and deception. The KPFA Foundation bankruptcy tactic continues. The physical attack on WBAI made in October of 2018 was long planned. One part of the narrative being that KPFA is so competent and solvent and WBAI so the opposite that we'd be better off without it and could use the money to bail out other stations. A first step in gaining control of KPFA and wresting it out of Pacifica. Losing the largest media market in the country, as well as the 3 other stations in major metropolitan areas and 240 nationwide affiliates and the historic Pacifica archives, what, quote, progressives would want that? Yet, yes, radio may be in trouble, but we Pacificans possess an intelligent, creative, devoted listenership which earlier this year saved our network from an attempt at a set of previously created bylaws just as destructive as these current ones. Don't be fooled. We can come up with solutions. Positive changes are already being made. Our bylaws can be updated. They were an attempt to protect us from future takeover attempts and have just about done so. Don't let the breakers drag us into another round of pointless expenditures meant to break us further financially. This is not a frivolous factional fight. It's an attempt to take over our valuable free speech network for private ideological gain, and we're not going for it. May our next amendments to our bylaws take place in a bylaws convention where we put in place measures to prevent any such future attempts to misappropriate our unique democratic structure, which lets us tell the truth and can create free speech for all our diverse communities struggling for a positive human existence and against corporate takeover. We would be foolish to believe that there has been no, I'll mention that during the questions. And
Thank you, Myra. Are you done?
Yeah, and I'm done.
Thank you, Myra. Paulina, you have the floor. Paulina, you have to unmute yourself.
Yes, I realized that. Sorry, I was finishing telling our friend Lona to join us in this in this forum instead of calling me. Anyways, Mara, thank you very much. That was very informative and very well summarized. Now I'm going to share my screen. For those of you who are on your phones, I will try to narrate everything that I'm doing, but just if it's helpful to also look at what I'll be going over, hopefully, because I'm also going to share a little bit of audio, like 30 seconds. So we call it deja vu all over again. What is it that these New Day Pacifica bylaws propose? They propose a centralized self-selecting board structure. What does that mean? No more local station boards elected by membership at large, but rather self-selecting boards, mainly self-selecting boards. I'm not going to go into all of the details. I'm sure if you're interested, you can study them, but that's the main idea. There's no room for local oversight by the listeners or staff of the stations, because if there's no local station board, then of course there are no local committees. There's no finance committee. There's nobody to break their excuse me about where are the documents, so what are you doing with the fund drives, so on and so forth. That's exactly the complaints, right? Now there's also no room for any minority representation, because if there's only one national director elected per station, there's no room for diversity. It's exactly what the March bylaws referendum attempted to do and failed, because we defeated it, because it was rejected, right, by listeners and staff, both membership classes, at approximately 2-1, pretty much across the board. Now, this is just another attempt to return to the anti-democratic structure that Pacifica used to have before 2002. Now, importantly, New Day Pacifica is based on the same lies behind the last attempt to de-democratize the little democracy that we have, the hard-won democracy that we need to expand, not limits. Now, what are their arguments? Pacifica faces an existential crisis, right? It's like the shock doctrine. We're in an existential crisis, and the Pacifica National Board and the local station boards are quote unquote dysfunctional and incapable of dealing with said crisis. And that unless amendments, so-called amendments, really they should be in quotes, are adopted, because these are rewritings, a complete rewriting really of the bylaws. They can't even put the two sets of bylaws next to each other and compare them, because they are there is no item by item comparison because it's a complete rewriting of the whole constitution, let's say, of the whole bylaws, unless the amendments being proposed are adopted, then Pacifica is doomed. Well, here are a couple of examples of this. Let me play these. Here we go. Let's see if you can hear them. Let me see if my sound is going out. Let me see. One sec. Oh, back. Here. Nope. Sorry, I'll be quicker than this. What's going on? Here we go. Play. Should be playing. It's not playing, huh? I'm sorry. Well, anyways, I was going to play you the 30 seconds of our general manager pretty much telling on the air, telling listeners that it's the boards, the dysfunctional boards. It was also Ian Masters. You don't need to hear those folks. Forget them. Now, who is NZP, right? Who are the National New Day Pacifica? They're sponsored mostly by the same cast of characters, almost the same. I don't know what Sharon Kyle is doing there, but it's Jen and Lyndon and Akio and others behind the scenes. Whose proposal was defeated before. They tweaked it a little bit, and here they go again. So why should you trust a handpicked transition board, right? They're proposing a transition board filled by people who supported the shutdown of BAI, and I think pretty much Mara did a great job already explaining all this. They supported bankruptcy as a quote unquote solution to Pacifica's problems, and they still continue supporting turning Pacifica stations into repeaters of a sanitized NPR Light Pacifica Across America content. That we know for sure because that's exactly what's being pumped into the KPFK airwaves right now from KPFA during the evening news. And the strip programming pretty much is that's what it sounds like. So why should we trust them? I don't think we should. I don't think you guys think so either. So given that it's an assault on democratic governance, which is messy but necessary, and they're trying to centralize the structure, remove oversight of local station boards by local station boards. They're proposing a winner-take-all voting system method, right? And get rid of our much more progressive current voting method. And given that both paid and unpaid staff are actually going to lose proportional representation, but unpaid staff will do so tenfold. And the affiliates will lose representation as well, percentage-wise. And the fact that the way it's going to be set up, such a much smaller board, 15 directors instead of 22 currently. 3 of them being at-large directors who will be selected by the board itself, so that if there's a majority faction, then they will become a super majority, given that they're selecting a good portion of the board. All of that, pretty much, given it's a second attempt, and we actually did a video that I don't have time to play necessarily, but we. Let me see if it works out. It'll give me a second to take a drink of water because I'm thirsty. We did this during in March for the last referendum. Something's wrong with my sound though. But it has subtitles, so you don't need to hear it. 1 sec. I'll be right back. So this is this video is by the Association of Spanish Language Programmers. at KPFK in Los Angeles. It does have sound. So then after that, we give details that are irrelevant currently because we're not in that stage yet, right? Nobody's getting a ballot yet. But basically, we informed our, let me pause it. We informed our members, right, our staff members about what was going on and what needed to be done, what they needed to be on the lookout for, etc., etc. We're not at that stage yet, but I'm pretty much done. I would say, let me see. Hopefully, we won't get to this. Hopefully, we were not going to need to spend money on this. This was costly, right? This is a referendum that cost us approximately 150K. I also recommend, let me just go back into presentation mode and quickly recommend a couple of things. Well, first of all, I wanted to cite our chair of the Pacifica National Board, Alex Steinberg, as saying the idea that Pacifica's problems can be solved by getting rid of our democratic governance system is just a case of magical thinking. End quote. That's Alex Steinberg. Thank you, Alex, for that wisdom. I agree on that on that note. And then also I wanted to cite my other source, pacificainexile.org, and Tracy Rosenberg's very thoughtful and meticulous analysis of what these bylaws are really proposing. I don't know if we have time to go into it, but if we don't, I would rather just pause and have everybody take questions, and I'm happy to share this or share the links to my sources.
Yeah, Paulina, we don't have time for that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and these
Thank
are my sources. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Maybe we could put it on the Pacifica Fightback website.
Happy to do so.
PK?
I'm sure it's already there.
Yeah.
I'll turn it over to you.
You can copy the links into the chat also.
Yeah, you can do that. They'll be saved, but it's a lot of material to go through. Thank you, John, Mara, and Paulina. I think that your presentations lays it all out for us. Is there anybody who thinks that it's not, you might want to give us back the screen. Thank you. Is there anybody who doesn't understand New Day now or have questions about it? But in the meantime, you're welcome to raise your hands.
There's John Jacobs.
Yes.
Has his hand raised.
That's Steve Zelser.
I don't understand who New Day is and who you're opposing. Did you hear me?
Yes, your question, and I didn't know who wanted to answer it.
I've heard a lot of people making speeches, but I'm more confused than ever. So there seem to be two factions here. And so can you explain the difference between the two? I mean, there are programmers that I really like, and I heard one person mentioned, it seems like you're opposed to him. And if that happens, I don't even want to be part of Pacifica anymore. I'm an old-time listener. I think it's a great station. I would hate to see it die out.
Can I address that?
Sounds to me as if you are...
Hold on, John. I was going to go to you, John.
Okay.
John Jacobs, are you done?
Please explain.
Okay, go ahead, John. And then if Paulina and Myra want to chime in, they want to go.
Tell me who you are opposed to, please.
I want to. Well, hi, my name's John Riley. I'm from WBAI. And I think that there's been sort of a consolidation of a couple of groups that are in Berkeley that are, they're very frightened about the possibility of, financial collapse of Pacifica. And instead of having an attitude of solidarity and like, we're in this together in order to solve our problems, they're kind of a go it alone kind of mentality. And they've been organizing under various names over the course of the years. And they came together in something called the Crisis Group in 2016, and they came up with 6 plans for how to save themselves, but they're not so interested in saving the rest of Pacifica. So, and there's been calls from some of their members for the dissolution of Pacifica, for the dividing up of the assets. Carol Spooner is a prominent individual that's been involved in several of these formations. Now, the formations, they seem to have people come and go, you know, and sometimes people are playing a role during one period and not so much the next period, but maybe in the following period. So anyway, it's not like a direct organizational lineage, but basically the same groupings of people are involved. And, you know, I think that the whole concept of, you know, fighting among people that are, you know, roughly in the progressive camp is something that's, you know, can be disheartening at times, but we have to understand sometimes there are really serious differences. And, you know, it's pretty clear that a number of the people that are involved in what's now called New Day Pacifica, you know, seriously want to sell WBAI, and they're not really interested in anything else. And there are other proposals, but they're not behind them, and they're doing it kind of a go it alone kind of thing. And New Day Pacifica, many of the people that were involved in this were, at least some of the people that were involved in this were involved in the October takeover of WBAI, where broadcasting was completely shut off. And that signal was pumped in called Pacifica Across America that had nothing to do with the WBAI signal area. You know, there might be like Democracy Now!, which is a national show that's also on BAI, that remained, but most of the rest of the programming was annihilated. And that was all done under secrecy. It was done by an executive director that did not have consent of the board. And there was a whole set of maneuvers that were on the board that were to undermine the
Summarize, John, please.
yeah, well, it's basically to take control of the board illegally by making their minority faction the only ones that could vote. So that that's about all I have to say, other than I think that sometimes people go down a wrong path, which I think New Day Pacifica has gone down, and they're a long way down that path, and they're going to keep coming down that path. And we need to defeat them in whatever new referendum they put forward, because we know what the new referendum is, and it's just about as bad as the last one.
Okay, thank you, John. I'm gonna go to Myra or Paulina if you want to briefly address John Jacobs' concerns, and then I'm gonna go to Steve Seltzer and Tom Voorhees.
Yes, Paulina here. I'd like to briefly, Mr. Jacobs, thank you for speaking up. I understand that it's disconcerting. I would also just like to remind folks that this is nothing new at Pacifica, where self-perceived leftists and leftists fight against each other. It's COINTELPRO, you folks. It never stopped. We are being divided because that way is it's an easier way to rule us. And you know, and this is not a conspiracy theory. This is a fact. For anybody who's lived in this country in the 50s, 60s, up to the 70s, COINTELPRO is not gone, and the Pacific is a microcosm of the country, and it's a microcosm of the Democratic Party. Now, to the specifics. We're not, I don't think we're opposing anybody in particular. We're opposing the idea of the whole network being dismantled or allowed to die rather than thrive. And you know, and if it takes, I don't know, if in my opinion, if it takes for KPFA to take a vote and go be its own thing.
Okay, thank you, Paulina.
Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you, Paulina. Mara, you want to address Mr. Jacobs' concerns, and then I'm going to go to the stack. All right, Mara, I don't hear you. You're muted. I'm going to go to the stack. Steve Sosa, you have the floor, followed by John and Ted, and that's all I have so far.
Yeah, well,
And Michael Novick. Okay.
yeah, I think, first of all, I think KPFA has been a central force in this corporatization of Pacifica with strip programming. They got rid of the KPFK news. And basically, when we talk about governance, one of the things about governance that we believe is that there should be transparency. You need to have transparency with the listeners and supporters of Pacifica. Well, the reality is that the last election, which on corporate bylaw changes, was defeated 2-1 nationally, including with KPFA listeners. And the manager of KPFA and the managers of all the stations were directed to report that to the membership. That never happened. The KPFA manager and the KPFA news department never reported to the members of KPFA, the listeners, what were the results of that bylaw vote was. And that was supported by the supporters of the KPFA majority who are supporting these corporate bylaws. So we want to talk about hypocrisy and duplicity. They're talking about governance and allowing democracy. In reality, they won't even report to the listeners of KPFA what the results of the last bylaw vote was. But beyond that, they've carried out a racist policy at the station. For example, J.R. Valerie, who had a report called the Block Report, said that he was treated in a racist way. It was like a Ku Klux Klan, the way he was treated at the station. He was summarily terminated from the station. Militant programming of Blacks and others have been removed from the station. This is part of the attack on WBAI. And Sabrina Jacobs, Quincy McCoy, these people who are supporting this new programming agenda, or new bylaw agenda, are the ones that shut down WBAI illegally. And one of the problems of governance at this point in Pacifica is the people who did these illegal actions are still in the KPFA governance and Pacifica governance. So the people who acted illegally to shut down WBAI are still on the Pacifica National Board. They still have management positions at KPFA. This is a problem. If people are not held accountable for what they do, then you've got a problem that this is acceptable. It's okay to do these kinds of things. And that is a critical thing. The other thing is they say that through this governance change, they'll be able to increase the listenership, the support for Pacifica. Well, we have to ask ourselves, why in the midst of the greatest crisis in our lifetimes, probably since the Civil War, with a possible coup, racist attacks in this country, we aren't increasing our viewership and our membership and our support? Why is that? And it is not because of governance, it's because there are people in Pacifica who have power who don't want live programming, who don't want a multimedia platform. Why in Houston do we not have more Black and Latino programming, or even Asian programming, Chinese programming, Korean programming, and Iranian programming in Los Angeles? We need to reach out to these communities with programming. These the present people who really are in charge of Pacifica are opposed to this kind of programming. And in the case of KPFA, we could have
15 seconds, Steve.
We could have 2 digital channels and actually have this more programming to increase our listenership. The last point is, when we talk about their what's happening to KPFA, they propose, the majority who support these bylaw changes, having a survey of the manager, having a evaluation of the manager without even doing a survey of the staff. And they were ordered by the Pacifica National Board. You have to have a democratic process for evaluating the manager, where the staff, paid and unpaid, can make their views known. They refused to do that, so they were ordered. We don't even know if that's going to happen. So when we talk about a governance and who they really represent, they're a corporatization of Pacifica, and they have really contempt for the listeners and the supporters of KPFA, and that's why they're operating as they are.
Thank you, Steve. Just a real quick question. Matthew, do you have your hand up? I see your hand in, yeah, okay. So I got Tom Voorhees, Ted Weisskopf, Michael Novick, and Matthew Jenkins. Tom, you have the floor.
Okay, I'm going to be real short. There's been more than one comment today about the deteriorating quality of the KPFA and what was the KPFK news, which has now all been consolidated into the West Coast news. And I generally agree with that. I mean, I've been a listener since 1954 and been involved in governance in and out a couple of times and what have you. But I would like everybody to be aware, first of all, the news during the week are paid people, right? They're salaried people. And for a noticeable difference, listen to the West Coast news on Saturdays, which starts in the top of this coming hour, for a noticeable positive quality difference. And that's all I have to say. And they're all volunteers on Saturday, and that's it.
You're muted, Lawrence.
I am muted, so I'm sorry. I have, can you please lower your hand after you speak? I have Ted Weisskopf, Michael Novak, and Matthew Jenkins. I will not mute again. Thank you, PK. Ted?
Someone suggested that we take over the stations. To me, that sounds like someone who's a part of the FBI and a part of COINTELPRO, and I'll call it out. I mean, I think it's about putting ourselves forward for a federal offense and for a mass arrest that would set us back a long, long way. I'd like to hear some response to that crazy idea.
Thank you, Ted. I'll exhaust the stack, and then I will try to address your question, and maybe Michael could as well. Michael Novak, you have the floor.
Yeah, I did actually respond in the chat. We're not talking about any kind of physical takeover, and somebody raised it similarly on another call. That is not the purpose of this group. We're trying to organize people politically to alert and educate people about the threats to democracy, the existence of white supremacy and elitism within Pacifica itself, as well as in society, and to try to make Pacifica a more effective mechanism and live up to its potential. The reason Pacifica is so threatening and why the forces, and in particular the Democratic Party, corporate Democratic liberals, are trying to control it and dismantle it, is because they see the potential. The potential is we have cities stations in New York, DC, Houston, LA, Berkeley. It's like as I've said before, it's the financial capital, the political capital, the energy capital, the entertainment capital, and the digital capital of the United States, with tremendous talent pools that we're not tapping to in any of those areas where people are producing their own content now through social media and through many to many, but we're not realizing our potential, and so we're vulnerable for that very reason. And they therefore see that rather than allow that potential to be exercised and the full force of the Pacifica affiliates, which we are doing now with, for example, the PNB mandated Pacifica Race and Democracy as a show, and it ran for a month, and now it's still going on, and it's incorporating content from the 200 affiliates as well as from all 5 stations, and it's doing it pretty much on an unpaid staff basis. So that potential is there, but if it's not realized, then the New Day Pacifica strategy is to they see the parts as more valuable than the whole. They want to monetize it by breaking it up, and it's not just BAI by any means. Bill Crozier's faction at KPFT created its own foundation. They want to raise money to support KPFT, not through KPFT, but through their own foundation, because they want to take it over. KPFK in Los Angeles is 90.7. It's one of the strongest signals, if not the strongest, west of the Mississippi, and the NPR affiliate here wants it. They have a very weak signal. They want to swap and give Pacifica cash. And if KPFA thinks it's immune to that, they're also on the commercial dial, just like WBAI. It's 94.1 in Berkeley, and it's also a valuable signal. And so the people who want to dismantle Pacifica take it over in order to dismantle it and monetize it it's a suicidal strategy. And the counter to that is we have to organize. We have to organize a base in every one of the signal areas of people who are producing content out of the struggles we talked about earlier, the Black Lives movements, Black Lives Matter movement, the the dreamers, the American Indian movement, and many other forces. People struggling around mass incarceration, people struggling around police and prison abolition, people struggling for migrant rights. All those people are not even tuned into Pacifica, if they ever were involved at all. And so we have to bring those people together to take it over politically. That's what we're talking about, to take it over politically and make it into what it can be, to change the entire status quo and political dialogue in the entire country. I'm done.
Thank you, Michael. Matthew, you have the floor. And then I'm gonna put myself on the stack. If you wanna get on the stack, you could go and raise your hand in the chat, or you could raise your hand through your video, and I'll see you. Matthew, you have the floor, sir.
Yes, thank you. I'll be very brief. Basically, the thought that comes to mind in responding to New Day Pacifica, it's just 2 cents worth. Save the grassroots Pacifica, kind of in opposition as a vision to really unite against the more gentrified changes that are being proposed, and just to really preserve democracy at the grassroots. Save the grassroots Pacifica, and just expose the fact that the New Day Pacifica plans, especially those 3 directors, the at-large directors, but not only the at-large directors, it's the fly in the ointment to the plan. And we just need to just spotlight the flaws, really, and just show why we have something, even though Pacifica may not be perfect, and there's a lot of work to do, as was discussed earlier today, fighting racism, fighting institutional racism. New Day Pacifica isn't going to cure that or fix it. It's going to set things back. So just my 2 cents worth, save the grassroots Pacifica and shine the light on, the flaws in New Day. It's the same old day.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Matthew. So I'm just going to be brief. I think the intent of New Day Pacifica, after they were defeated, Mr. Jacobs, in the previous referendum 2-1 by staff and listeners alike, is to rule or ruin. I mean, it seems like that is their intent. And it's obvious that their intent is not to be transparent in regards to their proposal, because they have not highlighted any of those changes in the bylaws in their proposal. I think the difference is, and this I'm going to go on a limb on this one, Mr. Jacobs, but the difference is that we want to preserve democracy for Pacifica, for those people to continue to have a voice that I know that you have for many years, and so have I. And I'm not going to stop that struggle till my son comes back to Pacifica. My son is like completely tuned out, and he's a 22-year-old. And so those are the people that I think we should be trying to bring in and address those real issues that they are facing today out there in the streets. As you know, when we were young, we were always demonized. And it's really appalling to see the kind of condition and demonization that has been going on by the corporatizing of a network that is, by its very nature, was intended to address those antagonisms in our society. So I think that's the difference. And does anybody else want to put their hand up or want to share?
This is Bella. I put my hand up a while ago. I don't know if you noticed.
Oh, I didn't see it in the chat. Go ahead, Bella. I don't see anyone else. Thank you.
Yeah, look at the participants panel.
I did. Her hand was raised.
I
Oh,
did put my hand up.
now it is. Okay. I see. I see Bella and Rachel. Go ahead, Bella.
Okay, thank you. So the way Steve explained the nucleus and nuclei at KPFA as the epicenter, harboring, ushering in these attempts to corporatize the foundation. We have to understand, and I've had long conversation with Steve Seltzer about this. As long as we permit these people that are on that opposite side, aiming to destroy Pacifica, to remain in our midst. By that I mean in our local station boards, at each signal area, and then our directors at our national Pacifica National Board, then we cannot defeat finally these people. They are draining us of the resources. And this is the reason why around 3 of the stations in the network have been bought out. These are the general managers and program directors who control the airwaves. They will not give any airwaves to our local station board elections. They will not report to the listeners. And they have blocked every opportunity to listen to what the listeners want to hear on their station. As long as we have that wall dividing us from our listening signal area, we have a major issue. So I have continuously, and I will continue saying this, if our national board does not take bold, radical action to clean house of this dead wood, that I call it, we will be here again next year and the year after. And I don't think we can sustain it. So I'm hoping that some action comes out of this, and because I'm very tired of this. And we, thank you.
Thank you, Bella. John Brinkley, did you ask to be on the stack?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I will put you on the stack. I got Rachel before you. Please lower your hand if you already share. Steve, Bella. Rachel, you have the floor, and then Mr. Brinkley.
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to ask a quick question. I would really like it if before this meeting was like officially over, for us to be planning some actions, whatever form or format that might take before this meeting is over, because we've had like meetings before, and I think it's important that we start planning actions, but I don't want any programmers or producers who are on the air at BAI or any other station for that matter to lose their programs because of that. You know, that's not freedom of speech. So I'm just, hoping that we can make a plan of action of some sort so that we can report on it for the next town hall meeting.
Thank you, Rachel.
I'm done.
Thank you, Rachel. You could also put it in the chat, or you could email Pacifica Fightback at gmail.com any proposals that you may have, and the group will take it up. Thank you for your suggestion. Good suggestion. Mr. Brinkley, sir, you have the floor.
Okay, I think to get at the root of what the issues are, I think it all can be traced back to financing. I think that since the Pacifica is undergoing a financial crisis, folks are coming out with self-serving solutions. But if we address the underlying issue, I think a lot of things will, be dealt with. I think we need I know we haven't been able to get the Corporation for Public Broadcasting funds because of faulty audits, and we need to shore that up and get that underway as soon as possible. I understand the earliest will be 2019 will be done in February or something like that. But short of getting those funds back, we need to come up with a better way, not taking loans or anything like that, of undergirding our financial stability so that it won't be stations desperate to save themselves by killing their brother and sister.
Thank you, Mr. Brinkley. Good to see you again. I met you in New York many years ago. It's good to see you, sir. I have somebody from the 424 area code that has a hand raised in the chat, and you are unmuted. You have the floor, sir.
Yes, this is Andrew. I spoke earlier from KPFK. And as a listener, long-term listener, I trust in all the listeners to support the station and to know the right thing to do. And so what we need to do is empower ourselves. So the way to do that is, number one, to organize ourselves, and number two, to use the only power we have to insist on changes to the management, and that's through our donations, because they rely on us for our donations. So I, one, will be withholding my donation in order to put pressure on the station. And if others would like to join in for a listener coalition, a member coalition, my contact information has been given to Bella, who is on the local station board of KPFK and on the outreach committee. You can reach me there, or to the contacts I announced earlier. If we band together and work together, I see that as the first step in getting our demands reached to the station manager. And the first demand would be to have accountability and open up the lines of communication between the listeners and the management. And that will be done through a weekly dialogue with the listener so that they can hear us out and they can report to us what's going on with our stations, what's going on with our funding, and how we can support the station in a better way and all work together. So as listeners and members, let's band together. I am starting an organization to do that. Please contact Bella for my contact information at the KPFK Listener Station Board and on the Outreach Committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. And I just want to say thank you for your support over the years. I know you. I don't know if you remember me. Lawrence, the big, tall, handsome Boricua
Yes,
guy.
I do.
All right.
From Puerto Rico, yes.
Okay. Okay, so PK, where are we with time?
Well, we're coming up on the 8 o'clock hour, which is kind of when we said.
Right. Okay. So we got 12 minutes. I don't know if any of the panelists from the previous panel and from this panel want to address some of the concerns that have been voiced.
This is Paulina. I would love to address some of the concerns briefly.
Go ahead, Paulina. You have the
Thank
floor.
you. Andrew, I don't know if we've met. Perhaps we have. Maybe I just have COVID brain at this moment. But I appreciate your feelings and your sense of duty. I'm a little bit concerned about the campaign to defund management and thus pressure them, for the following reasons. If we last a couple of weeks ago, we were not able to meet payroll on our own and had to borrow from others, and so if we, I feel at least maybe other board members, I'm a member of the national board, other board members may be in disagreement with me, but I just feel like sanctions and economic pressure sometimes, withholding your vote, absolutely. Withholding your money, I'm not so sure, because I feel like it also hurts all of us, all of those who are trying to keep us from losing the building and so on and so forth. So I don't know. I would just carefully consider and talk to others before starting a serious campaign like that. What I think we need now is all the opposite. I think we need folks to actually support us, despite and present it to the management, to our GM and PD. But I don't know. I mean, I might be mistaken. I want to hear other voices, but that's just my initial feeling is we should actually stand up for our stations, all of our stations. We should actually show them that we can do this and we can maintain the listener supported model, because what exactly what they're looking for is that the model fail, and then we go to NPR Lite, and we become a repeater of KPFA. No, thank you.
Thank you. Any other panelists? Any previous panelists want to chime in? I just I forgot to say something. I just want to say this real quick. Yesterday was the morning of Brother Fred Hampton Jr. from the Black Panther Party when he was assassinated in Chicago. So I just want us to send some positive
And Mark
vibes.
Clark.
And Mark Clark. And Mark
please.
Clark. Thank you. And Mark Clark. Thank you, Mimi. That's why I have you around.
I knew there was some reason.
Yeah. I just want us to send some good thoughts to the remaining family members. I know he has a son, Fred Jr., that is a really militant activist, takes after his dad, has the spirit of his father. And as you know, Fred Hampton was a catalyst and started the Young Lords Party and AIM and all the SNCC and all the other members of the Rainbow Coalition that he formed before it got hijacked by Jesse Jackson. Okay, Michael, did you have your hand up? You did, right? And
Yeah,
Mimi,
I did.
you too, right?
So I wanted to chime in along with what Paulina was just saying. As an LSB member and board members in general, I don't think we can advocate for a boycott of the station, but I also think that it's ill-advised at this point. What we're actually trying to do is organize a very, very large base of basic members. In other words, if we could get 1,000 people to join KPFK for $25, that's 1,000 votes that would sweep the LSB election. It would swamp anything that New Day Pacifica can do if it's put to a referendum. We're trying to get people at every one of the stations to join as basic members who have been turned off by Pacifica or used to listen and stopped listening or never even heard about Pacifica. That's when Jean Kayani earlier was talking about we need to get organized. That's what she's talking about. She's talking about building a base, putting out a program and organizing people around that program for what they're not getting on Pacifica that they deserve to get, and that they're producing themselves in many cases in other media. I just want to say one word about the social media. I do think that we need to have a social media presence. We need to be podcasting. We need to be multimedia. But there is a case to be made for radio, which is that it is the ultimate in security and privacy compared to any social media, because all the social media are now dominated and controlled by corporate institutions for the most part, unless you're talking about encrypted email with something like Rise Up or Signal. And so I think that there's an argument to be made that we want to have radio, terrestrial radio, that anybody can listen to without anybody knowing they're listening, and anybody can call in without anybody knowing who they are. And so, on the other hand, I think we need the spirit of social media, which is a many-to-many spirit. It's an interactive spirit, and we need to bring that into the radio operations. We need to bring that opportunity for people to get on the air. I'm done.
Okay, thank you. I have somebody who hasn't raised his voice yet. You have your hand up, brother. All I see is AF. You have the floor, AF.
Great, thank you. My name's Anthony Fest. I'm in the KPFA area. I did the news, Sunday news on KPFA for 20 years, and I've been on the LSB for 3 terms. Now, I'm not discounting by any means the danger of if these new day bylaws did pass, and yet I also think in a way it's a very clever distraction, almost a shell game, saying, you see, the P is really under the bylaws shell. And in fact, it isn't. I mean, Pacifica is a radio network. And radio, what's important in radio is the programming. And yet, at least at KPFA, in the 6 or 7 years our manager has been in charge, the programming has changed very little. And in the entire time I've been listening, there's never, even though our manager is a black male, we've never had a black male hosting a regular morning drive show, with the sole exception of the time when we had an unpaid morning show called the Morning Mix, which was summarily eliminated by a previous manager. Also, there's never been, with the exception of the Morning Mix, never been a Latino or Latina regular host on the morning show in the time I've been listening, nor anyone of Chinese, Japanese, or Filipino ancestry. I mean, that is quite an incredible record of ignoring the diversity of our region. I mean, by comparison, our local TV stations, not known to be bastions of progressive thinking, but in their evening news shows, their prime time, they certainly have had, black, brown, and Asian hosts aplenty. And yet our so-called progressive radio station has not managed to accomplish that. Also, Asian and Asian American people are now a plurality in Alameda County, where KPFA is based, and yet there's only 1 hour a week dedicated to those communities. They're also the plurality now in Santa Clara County, the largest county in Northern California, and yet only 1 hour. We have no programming at all for the LGBT community on KPFA, just across the bay from San Francisco, arguably gay capital of the world. And really quite incredible. I could go on. No program for veterans, no program for elders, no program for youth anymore since they got rid of youth radio many years ago. And the consequence for this, I think, is that our listenership has been dropping and dropping and dropping. We've got about 12,000 odd subscribers now. Used to be twice as much. And perhaps Tom Voorhees can cite a time when it was even over 30,000. So they are failing. They point the finger at other stations and say, WBAI, you're failing. Well, they are failing too. They're just failing in slow motion, and they won't admit it. So we need change, and it needs to come from the top. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for addressing
Anthony.
that. Anthony, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Anthony, I'm going to go to, we're almost out of time. So I'm going to go to Mimi, and then I want to go to PK to end this town hall. Mimi.
Lawrence, I need to respond. Rather quickly. I won't take too much.
Go ahead, 30 seconds, Bella. 30 seconds, please.
Don't take any more time. I need to respond just to clearly say there is no effort to withhold donations. What we're doing is we're doing a very careful campaign. What we are doing is we are increasing we are increasing the list of members so that we can get that $25 donation, especially now, so they can vote in June.
Thank you.
All of this is convergence of ideas, okay? Hang tight.
Thank you, Bella. Thank you very much. Mimi, I'm going to give you 2 minutes, and I want to go to PK.
Thank you. I just want to say this is not the end of the discussion. This has to be the beginning, and it has to continue. And the comments were insightful and worthy of further contemplation. Within that, I just want to also for folks to say that as part of our continuation of this, WBAI in conjunction with WPFW is going to be doing a 2-hour special from 7 to 9 Eastern Standard Time on radio on both stations, looking at some of the very same issues. So frankly, actually, our management has been much more receptive and is doing a lot because of the internal pressure and the organizing that's gone on amongst the listeners and the staff to bring forward these issues and to make sure that we defeat quickly and hopefully without great expense, New Day Pacifica. The other thing I just want to raise is that I really do think that it's incumbent upon us to deal with what are some of the Achilles heel issues that allow New Day Pacifica to manipulate them to gain a foothold. And that is our economic insolvency. And I really would like to see us propose 3 things. And one is to move ahead with an economic summit that really looks at the capitalizing the capitalization going forward, the sustaining of our station, what the proposals would be, really fleshing out the details, shoring up if people believe in entirely a listener supported, if they have other ideas. In other words, an economic summit. The other thing would be, and I think it would also cut them off at the pass in some ways, which is there should have been, and there was supposed to be even in the bylaws, a bylaw convention that looked at and analyzed the viability of the bylaws one by one and sought whatever amendments might be needed to improve the kind of governance structure procedurally and substantively. And the third thing would be that as part of the plan, after we kind of get the economics, to think about a plan for the development programmatically, which means moving to multi-platform, the issues of podcasting, and contemporizing our forms of broadcast and expression to meet the various listening modes of different audiences. Youth listen differently than immigrant communities, etc. So I
Thank you,
really
Mimi.
think that we need to do that as a way of also not just being a complainant, which is well deserved, about the undemocratic dismantling sought by New Day Pacifica, but we need to put some of these fundamentals in place to move the network forward. And I hope everybody here will join with us to think about these ways of rebuilding, redeveloping, and enhancing the station that has an incomparably important core.
Thank you, Mimi. Michael, can you pronounce the website that people could visit and to communicate with Pacifica Fight Back, please? And then PK, I want you to take us home after that. Michael, can you please announce the website? You muted.
Sorry, the website is pacificafightback.org, all one word. There's also a list on lists.riseup.net. .net and the Pacifica Fight Back at list.riseup.net that people could join. They have to go to Rise Up to do it, or you can just email us at pacificafightback@gmail.com.
Thank you, Michael. PK, take us home, please. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending. And I see some people that supported the restructuring Pacifica project. I ain't gonna say no names, but you know who you are. I'm glad that you came, and I hope that you would reconsider remaining democratic. PK, you have the floor.
I want to thank everyone for tuning in. We had some folks with Facebook. We had kind of a problem at first. It was saying private. I didn't want that, but this will be on Pacifica Fight Back YouTube station, which I didn't have a link to. We've got some things to discuss, guys, on tomorrow. Again, thank you, everyone. Your voice is so important. And more than that, it's going to take all of us and to use the best of our minds to figure out a way not to beat New Day, but to create relationships across the board of people who are working together. I always say there are more of us than there are of them. They just cheat. So we have to have ethics and integrity about the work that we do, and it's doable. A lot of people who had never participated or hadn't participated in a while were on this call, close to 60 people. So we thank you. And
one last thing, PK. Mimi, the show that's going to air on BAI and WPFW is Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, right? So
yes, you better know that you're a participant.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, I didn't know that. John told me. Okay, cool. PK, is there anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I just want to thank the panelists on both sections. You spoke truth to power, and we are grateful for it. I realize that there are people who still have questions, but go to Pacifica Fight Back for information and ask questions of the people that you trust or otherwise like, and you're not sure about it, ask them to tell you the truth, because it's the truth that only matters right now. So I appreciate this opportunity to bring people together. I've got a lot of young people listening in and watching. They want to be a part of it. They really do. They just don't want to have to struggle with the past.
Michael, you came off of mute. Is there anything you want to say on the way out?
I want to thank everybody who came on the call and the panelists and PK especially for setting this up and the whole tech land hosting the Zoom call and keeping us moving on. I think we actually did it in 3 hours and that's an achievement in and of itself. I think we got some serious work done in that time.
Go ahead, Paulina. You came off of mute too. You want to say something?
I did, yes, I did. I do. First of all, profound thanks to everybody, panelists and those who participated and those who were here, those who listened, those who didn't. I wanted to say to PK very quickly, I don't have access to the Pacifica Foundation TV YouTube channel anymore. Apparently, I got bumped off of that, but I still am I think I still can post to the YouTube channel that we have as Fight Back. I just noticed that today. So if you need me to post this video, just make sure you make me host for a second for this video so I can grab the recording.
I will make sure to do that, Paulina. And again, thank you for turning off the sounds of the dings and bings.
No problem.
Michael, did you record it, Michael?
No, the recording is by PK because she's the host.
Right, you get together with Paulina.
The Pacifica Fight Back YouTube channel was created like 2 days ago when I got the other video and created a channel to host it on. So that's.
Oh, and you, Michael, you included me. I appreciate that. Okay, thanks.
I don't know if I did. If I did.
Yeah, you did. You did.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't.
I created it from the. The Pacifica Fight Back Gmail account. I think so. You're probably on there.
That's
automatically.
Got it. Understood.
Okay, PK, a couple of words of wisdom, and we'll go home. Some of us are at dinner time here on the West Coast, and some people are at the time you ain't supposed to eat on the East Coast. PK, you want to take us out?
The only words of wisdom I want to give you are the ones that my grandmother used to give to us when we would go and play with children whose parents had a lot of money. Don't pick up any bad habits, she would say. In other words, we cannot use the tactics of the oppressor to end oppression. That's my 2 cents. That's my little girl picture. That's what I think of me as, that little girl. Take care.
Okay. All right, peace, everybody. Ache, PK, thank you. Okay, bye, people. To the next one.
Bye.
Oh, by the way, thank you, Claudia. That was my intern.
PK, is your intern gonna post to Fight Back or should I? I can post to. I mean, to the YouTube the channel. What do you prefer?
I'll email you. Or text you or call you.
I'll just download it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, bye, good people.
Bye. Bye, y'all. Bye.
Thanks, Nick.
I think we did okay, guys.